Again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the coffee break. We are about to kick off the second part of our thrilling panel on future-proof e-charging. While in the first part of the session, we've been discussing about governance issues, now we will focus on specific actions like public funding for the charging corridors or the procurement for smart charging. After the two presentations that we will be listening now, we will also have a Q&A sessions that will last 30 minutes as the previous one. But before starting with the presentations, I would like to launch a new poll. You look at the poll section. Please, I really encourage you to answer this because I would like to know what's, in your opinion, the most impactful action to support the rollout of Evie infrastructure. And I hope that you have learned a lot from previous panels, so that's why I want to know what you think after hearing to all of our panelists in the first part of the session. I think that's all for the time being. We will look at the answers later on. So I am delighted to give the word to Simon Ruyters from Flanders Region. Hi.
Hi. Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to share some experiences and results of the BENEFIC project. I'm Simon Ruyters from the Flemish Department of Mobility and Public Works. I hope to convince you in 7 minutes that BENEFIC is quite a unique project, and I hope you get some useful information for future deployment of infrastructure in your own countries and regions. Next slide, please. I first want to very quickly introduce Flanders. So I hope you all know Flanders is one of the 3 regions in Belgium. It's a very small but dense region. We have a very dense rail, road and waterway network. We're also part of the so-called Blue Banana, which is the main transport corridor in Europe. And what's useful to know is that most of the transport policies in Belgium are actually developed on a regional level, including also the clean power for transport policies. Next slide, please. So let's start with some key facts of the BENEFIC project. BENEFIC was submitted as a project in the CEF Transport Call 2016, which was kind of a straightforward call, so no blending involved. We are 3 partners: Flanders Region, who's coordinator of the project, Brussels Capital Region, and the government of the Netherlands. We started in 2017, and we initially planned to end this year. But since we had some delays in the implementation of several projects, we, among others, due to the COVID-19 crisis, we requested an extension, and we hope this will be approved quite soon. We have a maximum EU contribution of about 7.5 million euros, but we hope with this project to mobilize in total about 37 million euros. And this is, of course, including the private investments in infrastructure we hope to achieve. And we have a fixed percentage of EU investment support of 20%. Next slide, please. So what are the main characteristics of the BENEFIC project and why is it unique? Well, first of all, it's a cross-border project. This is not so unique, but we're 3 public authorities involved. Secondly, and what's most unique is that it consists of a grant scheme. Grant scheme basically means that we receive EU funding as project partners and we distribute the funding through open calls for proposals. In this way, we hope to increase the accessibility for several public and private parties active in the partner regions to make use of the EU funds without having to go through the process of applying and submitting projects for CEF. The third characteristic is that the project covers a lot of different alternative fuels. First of all, we focus on electromobility. We have projects for normal power chargers, also high and ultra high power chargers, but we also have dedicated public and collective transport charging infrastructure in the projects. We also have some projects on natural gas infrastructure, on hydrogen infrastructure, and also onshore power supply for inland navigation. Next slide, please. INEA, which is the executive agency of the CEF program for the European Commission, also acknowledges that this is kind of a special project, and they also indicated that this could be a key policy tool for future support for innovation projects. So we're also very curious if the grant scheme system is included in future CEF programs. Next slide, please. We're of course limited to the TEN-T core network because it's a CEF project. We are 3 partner regions, and we have also 3 corridors. So all the projects have to be deployed on the corridor or very close to the corridor. Next slide, please. So basically what we did is organize open calls for proposals, and the starting point were the ambitions which were defined in the beginning of the project for each partner. We also defined maximum co-financing amounts for each separate technology, taking into account, of course, that there was a maximum co-financing of 20% of investment costs which were eligible in the project. And what we did is set up a procedure for the organization of the call and the selection of the projects, and we closely aligned with INEA because we of course have to make sure that all the CEF conditions were met. And next slide, please. So until now we organized 2 calls, the first one in the beginning of 2018, the second one in the end of 2018. In total, we have selected through these calls more than 30 projects, and we almost use all of our available co-financing budget. These projects are now being implemented. Some have finished, some have stopped. So yeah, we hope we have some fine results in the end, and we're currently also considering a 3rd reflow call if we get an extension of the project. Next slide, please. With these projects, we hope eventually to deploy an extra 1,000 infrastructure points for alternative fuels. And we got some press coverage when we selected the projects. Yeah, so we also got some feedback from INEA, so that was nice. Next slide, please. We included an overview of the projects on our website. We have a list of all the projects and a visual overview. So if you want more information, be sure to visit our website. Next slide, please. Today, we've already some first results on the ground. A few weeks ago, Fastnet opened its first ultra-fast charging station in Belgium. And this project was also co-financed by BENEFIC. Another nice project is electric bus project at Brussels Airport. So basically, they electrified all the passenger transport on the airport premises, and this was also done with the support of BENEFIC. And we have also bus projects in the Netherlands, in Brussels. We have shore power projects and natural gas projects. So we hope we will have more results in the future that we can share. Next slide, please. This is already my final slide, and I hope it's the most interesting slide. I want to share some lessons so far. In my opinion, the grant scheme as a system can be a useful instrument to distribute European funds to different regional parties. And it increases also the access for a broad range of parties with rather low administrative costs. So this is really a key objective of the project. For the public authorities involved, it's also very interesting to get a regional overview of infrastructure needs and locations. But we also encountered some challenges. The first one is that you need to translate European CEF conditions into regional project calls, and here you have to take into account the limited scope, the technical specification, and the reporting obligation. We also have seen that it's quite challenging to set up a good decision-making process and financial regulation with several public partners involved. And the last point is that, yeah, you need a thorough monitoring of the project implementation, and this requires frequent alignment with all partners involved. Next slide, please. So thank you for your attention. If you have questions, feel free to contact me, and I hope we can share more results in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I think you've made it very clear how the grant scheme works and what are its benefits. And I am looking forward to hear to the next presentation, which is from Jorden van der Hoogt, a technical specialist at Cenex Nederland.
Thank you, Anna. I hope you can all hear me well. So my name is Jorden van der Hoogt. I'm a technical specialist at Cenex Nederland, and I will present to you the lessons learned from the CV-City project. CV-City project is a co-funded Interreg North Sea region program in which POLIS was involved as well, and it demonstrates smart charging solutions and integrating renewable energy to optimize the supply and demand. And we have conducted this research in collaboration with the Northumbria University in Newcastle and the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. Next slide, please. So CV-City has 6 pilots located in 4 North Sea region countries. Next slide, please. And this is an overview of the 6 pilots. They vary in scale. From vehicle to home to a vehicle to city setup, and Loughborough being the smallest pilot and Amsterdam Flex Power being the largest. Next slide, please. So I will discuss the lessons learned from these 6 pilots with different skills, and the lessons are extracted from the processes of preparation, procurement, and installation. Next slide, please. So we have identified 4 areas for the lessons learned. These are technology, configuration, procurement, and business models. And the first area is technology. Next slide, please. And we see that the vehicle to X or vehicle to grid market is not fully mature. So the smart and bidirectional charging technologies are still in development. And in some pilots, for example, we saw that newer smart energy systems are better able to optimize different subsystems as a whole, whereas older systems may operate separately from each other. And therefore, the procurement and installation processes may change rapidly. Some manufacturers are reserved on providing warranties on the use of EV batteries for bidirectional charging or second life usage. And unfortunately, not all EV models have bidirectional charging capabilities. So mostly Nissan Leafs are used for DC V2G at the moment, which are using the CHAdeMO protocol. And the CCS protocol has V2G on their roadmap for 2025. Bidirectional chargers are very expensive as they are early products. The difference could reach as high as a factor of 20 to a regular EV charger, so that's pretty significant. But economies of scale is reducing the price in a rapid pace. And in a matter of fact, if we click one further, research shows that. Next slide, please. Yes, so here we see that research shows, that's one too far. Research shows that the cost of bidirectional chargers will reduce significantly over the coming 10 years that we can see in this graph. Next slide, please. So continuing to the second area, configuration, it became clear that every pilot is tailor-made. And some locations may already have systems that gather data, such as a PV system. Such data systems need to be able to communicate with new equipment that's being installed to achieve the best optimization possible. And technical issues may arise when implementing new equipment that is not compatible with existing equipment. This could occur in both soft and hardware components. And in the earlier phase of the project, most directional chargers were installed behind the meter as complying to the DNO requirements was or is more difficult. However, in the UK, for example, the grid codes have recently been changed, and this paved way for aggregators to operate V2G units for the customers. And lastly, you may be working with privacy sensitive data, so it's important to secure the collected data. If we move forward on procurement, knowing the market is key. There are hardly any companies offering a total system solution. So it's likely to create a consortia for installation and operation. And the products are novel and may have long lead times. This may be up to 4 months in some cases. One very important thing we also see in CME is investing in human capital can improve the communication and understanding of the project among those who are being involved. This also helps to understand what suppliers are offering with all of its necessary or possibly unnecessary features. Next slide, please. So the fourth and last area is business models, where it's clear that smart charging and V2G need customized business models. Of course, energy tariffs differ per country, and each operational pilot had to deal with its local energy tariff structures. And as each pilot has different scales with different use cases, there are many different user archetypes involved that were of importance to the business models. The avoided grid investments depend on the location and are network specific. And by location, we mean country, but also in a more local context. And right now, smart charging has currently the better business case because the units are less expensive and have a wider applicability. And the several strategies for smart charging are applicable to regular EVs, whereas V2G requires EVs with bidirectional charging capabilities. But V2G or V2X may become more rewarding in the future when the tariff structures alter. So three key takeaways. If we could move on to the next slide. There are still a lot of hurdles for V2G implementation. Price and availability of bidirectional charger systems are key barriers. So on procurement, in procuring equipment, we see that the compatibility of technology is in general poor and education is often required. And lastly, on the perspective, smart charging is currently favorable, but in the future with lower bidirectional charging units and more renewable energy generation, V2G still holds potential. And I have 2 closing slides. So if you have any questions or want to contact me, then you can find my email address at the last page.
Thank you, Jordan. I think that, and I hope that projects like SIP for City, Clean Mobile Energy, etc., that all these recommendations that you are issuing are really successful to create a more friendly environment for the solutions that need to be there in order to support clean energy transition, clean mobility transition, etc. Well, now we have reached the end of the presentation part of this session, and we are going to launch the Q&A session. But before going for that, let's check what are the results from the poll I launched at the beginning. In your opinion, what is the most impactful action to support the rollout of EV infrastructure? The winning answer is public investment in infrastructure at national level. Opinion on that? Anyone? By the way, I didn't, sorry, I forgot to invite the other speakers to the panel. Anyone wants to take the floor on this one?
I can start, Anna, thanks. Yeah, I think it all depends what's the current situation in your country or region. You definitely need a basic network of public infrastructure for a start, because you need to convince everybody that it's possible to get everywhere with an electric vehicle without struggling with charging. So that's definitely a good start, but I don't necessarily think that this will be the way forward in the future. So it all depends on the situation, the market players involved, the maturity of the market. So of course the authorities have a very important role to play, but I'm not sure whether it's always necessary to have huge public investments in the infrastructure. You can try to have other approaches, innovative approaches, but again, for a start, you need a basic network.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe I can add a bit on that. Actually, we were in Arnhem, or maybe in the Netherlands, we were actually moving away a bit from the public funds for charging infrastructure, because as all cities were sort of putting concession on the market, and here in Arnhem we have a very big concession for the province of Gelderland and Overijssel together, which is about 4,500 charging stations. But we were moving away from our fund because we actually said we granted to the CPO, who has the lowest charging tariff and and the lowest price per charging station. As it turned out, we didn't have to pay anything for a charging station as long as there's a demand for such a station. But I said we were moving away because while we are now going to a proactive placement of charging infrastructure, then we get the question of, okay, there are no users yet for this charging station, so a commercial CPO would never want to invest in that. So now we're looking at a sort of challenge for the next 2 years, in Arnhem at least, where we need to invest again in a proactive placement of charging infrastructure. And we want to do this, and that's, I need to stress that, I think, we want to do the proactive placement because we do not want the availability of charging infrastructure hinder the growth of EVs, the amount of EVs. So that's why we're doing that, but we need money for that. That's simple. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. I'd like to introduce Esther van Bergen to the audience. She's joined the panel discussions to support Jorden, as she's a colleague from him. Maybe you want to say some words about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Anna. Apologies, I couldn't join earlier. I'm happy to join now. And yeah, I'm a colleague of Jorden at Cenex Nederland, and we work together on the C4City project as well, and currently with Peter, amongst others, on the Clean Mobile Energy project on various topics relating to smart charging and V2X and energy management around that. And I think jumping into what Peter said in terms of the investment for infrastructure, I think it relates also to the fact that what we see happen in many of the countries is that once you place the infrastructure, the likelihood of increase in EVs on the road, is higher. So it removes a bottleneck, I think, a fear factor maybe for EV drivers or drivers to jump to the EV models instead of the combustion engine models.
To a certain extent, it's also inevitable that if we look at the plans of many OEMs, they are gonna produce much more EVs and even gonna stop producing ICEs. Better prepare for a good infrastructure because the EVs are definitely coming.
Absolutely. Actually, I have another question for you too, Jorden, Esther. All sectors are living a huge transformation in the current digital era, and we are also going through a clean energy transition. With the acceleration of communication technologies and the emergence of new mobility and energy services, what are the most disruptive business models that can help accelerate the deployment of a charging infrastructure? And most of all, the question is, why shouldn't we just invest in normal infrastructure rather than on costly smart infrastructure? What is in it for us?
For us, you mean the general public, Anna?
Yeah, the citizens.
Yeah. To start with the latter, maybe one of the key opportunities that comes with investing in smart charging solutions and also vehicle to grid type solutions and business models around that is, of course, with the growth expected and already ongoing in terms of EV share on the road, the demand for charging and electricity will come with that as well. And the grid needs to be prepared for that and needs to be able to accommodate that both locally and on a national level. And if there is a huge growth in certain areas coming with a huge charging demand, this might not be compatible to accommodate that. So then you would be faced with potential large grid investments, and these are very costly. And choosing a fitting smart charging solution for the location, or on a wider scale, maybe national or citywide, this can alleviate or avoid some of these costs for various stakeholders involved. I think that's one of the key drivers for choosing for the smart charging solutions. Maybe Jorden or Peter or any of the others want to join in?
If I may, just quickly respond on this, or actually raise a question more on this. So actually, it's great. In my view, it will be one of the main challenges to enable smart charging. Indeed, for the reasons that Esther mentioned, it's a huge challenge for the grid to avoid this peak charging, especially when people come home after work, etc. But of course, then I think it's a key challenge for public authorities, because it is not really, let's say, in the individual interests of CPOs to enable smart charging. So this is, and actually, it's very important for public authorities, because in the end, they are, let's say, responsible indirectly for the grid and also for grid investments. This is usually socialized in member states. So it will be a key challenge for public authorities to ensure that smart charging becomes basically the normal, and that it's not, let's say, in exceptional cases. They are the only ones who actually have this full overview of all the costs, and indeed it is much less costly to ensure smart charging than to have these very expensive grid upgrades. So yeah.
Yes, but can I add something to that, Alexander? What I would like to add is that yes, because I think the grid companies are the main beneficiaries of making sure that we do not need grid upgrades. So my question would be back to you: what kind of role do you think the grid companies should play in this area?
Anyone else want to make the point? So there is a new question from the audience for Simon. Sorry.
No, I was saying that it comes back to, if you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying that it comes back to the rules and who pays for what and who benefits from what. I think these are questions that are yet to be answered. Who pays for the grid upgradation? If the regulator says that I need smart charging, I'm paying in part to avoid grid upgradation. If I'm a fleet operator and I need a charging station at a particular location where grid needs to be upgraded, what is the ask from the fleet operator to pay for the grid upgradation? I think these are questions which are all unanswered, at least partially, if not fully. And there need to be more thinking on market rules around this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe I can add something about vehicle to grid. I mean, there are many opportunities. If you look at, we have a battery in our cars, which we can power a house for like 1 or maybe even 2 weeks if you have a large battery. In order to solve congestion problems for supply and demand because of the intermittent renewable energy systems, of course, we can make use of all these EVs that are being plugged in on the energy grid. And if there's a bigger trader system using vehicle to grid, we can solve a lot of congestion problems with this. And in fact, if we answer the question, what's in it for the public, using V2G services with your car, you can actually earn money while your car is standing still at your parking space. So the future systems can benefit both reducing cost, rewards for the public to participate in it, and have a solution for the congestion problems.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword in that even though for the grid congestion issues, the most benefit are with the grid operators, ultimately their investments, the investments they need to make or the costs they make, let's be fair, we eventually as customers, we pay them. So if they can be avoided, that will indirectly benefit us as the public as well. And if we, like Jordan says, you can also do that through storing it locally in the vehicle when it's not being used. We all know, I think on average a car stands still about 90% of its time, so it can be a flexible component to the grid in that respect, for storing temporarily when there's a lot available, a lot renewable available, and using it at a later stage to avoid these congestion issues, but also to optimize the use of renewable energy in the different locations where they are available. So and that ultimately will have its effect on the costs, the price you pay for the electricity that you use, either directly by your home location or at sites where you park the car when you're out and about, so to speak.
Quickly pick in on this. So another challenge, because I think you mentioned it already, it will of course depend on the electricity price that you pay. But if we look already now at the electricity bills, and at least in Belgium, I see that 30% is only relating to the actual cost of electricity production. I wonder how we can actually make sure that these price incentives will be there to really charge at let's say low peak hours. The prices will have to increase really drastically to enable this, in my view. And I don't think we are there yet. It's a question also to the others of the panel, of course.
Well, if I may react on that, Alexander, I think it brings us back to the governance question, because if you have a smart grid and you want to do something with the prices, you want to direct the power to the right place and the right moment, somebody needs to be in charge of these energy flows. And what we discussed also yesterday in a Solarize project is that maybe it was suggested by someone there that maybe the grid companies could take this opportunity to do the governance of these energy flows. Of course, in the Netherlands, they are not allowed to do that, but I think it's high time for the Netherlands anyway to finish off this energy law we have and start with a new law, because I think this energy law is way behind the energy transition we all want. So that's one of the directions I would like to investigate. Is the grid company one of the parties who could do this governance at a local scale?
Yeah, we need flexible tariffs to facilitate these kind of services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The parts that one of the things that we came across in our final evaluation in the Seafood City project, looking at the different pilots and the different countries, it definitely the pricing structure for the electricity grid and the policies around that are strong prohibiting factors at the moment. You do know we did come across the indications that all 4 countries that were involved, there was awareness that this needed to be changed, and there were plans to change that in future, but not a lot of concrete, new setups, new structures, and no concrete timelines yet. And I think particularly around the dynamic pricing structure possibilities that could enable a lot new business models, even with the grid operators, or primarily maybe the main player, or in how do you say that, in a partnership with other stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Perhaps things like the dynamic pricing structure, but also the double taxation for vehicle to grid is a very strong bottleneck there.
Sorry, Esther. Does that mean that it's not only in the Netherlands that the laws are a great hindrance to the energy transition, in other countries as well?
Yes, although I'm the first to admit I'm not an expert in this area, but we did do some research to find out what, for example, the potential was to translate some of these solutions in the project to another region, and we had to look at different dimensions, and one of them was regulation. So we had to look at what's going on around regulation in the energy market. So we did notice that these were similar. They differ slightly in detail, but there are similar bottlenecks in all 4 countries. Such as in the Netherlands, you have the salderingsregeling. If we talk about vehicle to X, for example, now, a salderingsregeling is actually counter stimulants for vehicle to grid, because it stimulates feeding it back into the grid instead of directly from the solar panels. So when that is supposed to be ending in 2023, the assumption is that this will benefit vehicle to grid and use of energy storage in general, because it's also the battery storage, the static battery storage, that will benefit from this. In the UK, they had a feed-in tariff until March 2019, I believe. That was when it ended. And they basically left it to the market. I'm paraphrasing a little bit now, but they did have to reinstate a new scheme that would guarantee that the energy market would provide some form of payment for energy being exchanged back and forth. A consumer organization estimated what a fair price would be, and it appears that most of the energy suppliers are actually coming up with offerings that are around that fair pricing. So when you allow some flexibility, it seems to be the case that the market will pick that up.
Absolutely. I would like to give some questions also to other speakers that have been asked by the audience. So first of all, for Simon, they congratulate you for your presentation and ask for any plans after BENEFIC.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I can hear myself. We started the project BENEFIC in 2017, so it's been a while. In the meantime, of course, we've had some other systems to deploy and roll out infrastructure in Flanders. So we have several ways to make sure we have a good network of infrastructure in Flanders. BENEFIC was kind of a first experience with EU funding for us. So depending on the results and the evaluation, we're definitely looking into more opportunities to make use of EU funding, because I think especially the CEF funding, there are quite some opportunities for public authorities as well. While in general, it's mostly private companies who apply for projects. So we're definitely looking into this, but in the meantime, we also announced a few weeks ago a charging plan for Flanders, and we actually announced to increase the number of public and semi-public charging points in 2025 to 30,000 with an extra 30,000 charge point equivalent. So we're definitely working on this, making use of the existing programs, but also developing our own programs. So we have no specific idea what will come after BENEFIC, but yeah, depending on the experience, we now know how the European funding works more or less. So we definitely want to use it again in future projects.
The other question is for Alexander. Could you give a hint on what could be on the table relevant to public authorities and for the member states? Are you aiming to look at things such as given number of charging points per member state?
Thank you for that question. So firstly, on the, let's say, the cooperation between member states and local authorities and different levels of government, we've received feedback that this was not always, let's say, a very successful cooperation. So this is definitely something we are looking to improve in a revised Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive. On the second question, in terms of the amount of recharging points, yes, obviously, let's say the deployment of recharging infrastructure is very high, is one of the key points on the agenda of the revision. The question will be whether we impose mandatory targets for member states. This is the key question. Will there be mandatory targets, or will we rather work again with let's say a target that is based on the EV uptake in member states, which is currently what is provided in the directive. Let's say that the jury is still out on this. We've not decided, and it can also be a combination of different aspects. So we're also looking more than we've done in the past to this so-called semi-public infrastructure, which is actually publicly accessible infrastructure, but in private domain. We're looking if maybe we can impose some obligations there, some deployment obligations. So all these things are on the table they were also in the public consultation. So, but I can't really preempt in what direction we will be going.
If I may just add,
yeah. Please.
Yeah, thanks. I would really think we need a smart technology or a smart methodology on EU level to set amounts and targets for charging infrastructure, because I think, in my opinion, the current way, which is like the 1-to-10 ratio, 1 charging point for 10 EVs, is not ideal to really monitor and evaluate the number of the charging infrastructure in countries and regions. For instance, in Belgium, we have a large amount of plug-in hybrids in our fleet. So we have now about, let's say, 20,000 battery electric vehicles, but 40,000 plug-in hybrid vehicles. So if we take the 1-to-10 ratio, if we take together the battery electric and plug-in hybrids, we don't reach the 1-to-10 ratio, but if we take only the battery electric vehicles, we have 1 public charging point for 5 battery electric vehicles. And we see, as I told you before, that the business case is not there at the moment. So we really need some smart methodology taking into account all these different factors, local characteristics, and then have a good monitoring system, so you can really monitor not only the uptake of the charging infrastructure, but also the uptake of the vehicles, because this should go hand in hand.
Briefly, just to agree with Simon, indeed, this is the challenge. Of course, we have, let's say, different levels of development of the markets in Europe, which makes it difficult to set one, let's say, standard for everyone. So this is definitely one of the challenges to determine a methodology which goes for all, or indeed to allow, let's say, diversified characteristics in terms of uptake, and to take account of that in the methodology. Of course, one thing which I haven't mentioned and I think is important to mention is that the EU has the ambition to have a deployment of 1 million recharging points by 2025. So somehow we will need to, let's say, make sure that the directive puts enough, let's say, ambition in the directive. There's enough ambition in the directive to achieve this target.
Alexander, can I ask you a question on that? To what extent do you think they will think about making these charging infrastructure smart? Because, for example, within FlexPower, we saw that these charge poles needed to be upgraded to become, smart and take part of a system. And if other municipalities want to join such a system or make it themselves, you need higher capacity charging infrastructure, so you can variate the rate of the charging units in themselves. So to what extent is do they take into account smart charging units?
So actually, let's say the deployment of smart infrastructure, or the ambition to have smart infrastructure out there, is already in the current directive. It was made subject to a cost-benefit analysis, and obviously that doesn't always lead to the actual deployment of such recharging points, of such smart recharging points. Now, let's say making sure that infrastructure is smart consists of different elements, and one of them, which is of course key, is to make sure that the different protocols for communications, that they are able to allow such smart communication. And this is certainly one of the key aspects that the directive will look at. I'm sure that we will not be able to regulate all of these technical aspects in a revised AFID, but we have actually just decided to set up a subgroup to the Sustainable Transport Forum, which, as I mentioned previously, is a multi-stakeholder forum. where we will involve different actors that are working on these, for example, these communication protocols, and we will, let's say, speeden the harmonization in this area to make sure that the communication protocols needed for such smart charging and in the future V2G, that they will become now harmonized and throughout the EU. I think that this is the first key aspect. Then, of course, linked to that is the fact that the recharging infrastructure should be connected. So otherwise, of course, you cannot. Otherwise, you have this so-called dump infrastructure, and also that is something which is obviously on the table to make sure that infrastructure is indeed that all the infrastructure is connected in the future.
Good to hear.
Thank you, Alexander. Well, now we have 8 minutes to wrap up this session. And I think the best we can do is to give you the floor again so that you can wrap up your message, the one you want the audience to take away from this session now. I will give the word back to Alexander. Please be conscious of the time because we need to end at 12:15.
Thanks, Anna. I'll be short. So, yeah, I'm hearing. Okay, now it's fine. So today I presented the recommendations for public authorities that we've just adopted 2 days ago. Unfortunately, they've not been published. Otherwise, I would have sent you already a link. They will be published in the coming weeks before the target is mid-December. And I think because the question was also asked, what is the key recommendation you would have for public authorities who want to start deploying infrastructure or want to get involved in this? I would say first thing to do is have a look at these recommendations. It gathers the best practices from public authorities throughout Europe. We've tried to give them very practical examples, things you can include in for example, tender concessions, tender documents. So I would really invite you to have a look at that. And I was told by Gabriela and Sabina, who are organizing this session from POLIS, that this would be shared. A link to these recommendations will be shared to all the participants once it's adopted. Very briefly, I would also like to mention that the Sustainable Transport Forum adopted approved the deployment of the development of another subgroup, which will actually focus or further the work on the recommendations. So we don't want to be this to be a one-time picture of the market, but we want to take account of further technological developments, further experiences by authorities. And this subgroup will be, there will be a public call for applications to join this subgroup. And I would really warmly invite all the public authorities who want to be involved in this process to respond to this call for applications and to become part of this discussion where you can then you can learn from the front runners, but you can also share your experience. So this is intended to be really a forum for exchange. And apart from looking at public tenders, we will also look at harmonizing permitting procedures throughout Europe, because this is also one of the key hurdles currently for project developers. So also there, these links, they will be shared with you after this. Once the call is out for application, we will share the link with you, with all the participants to this panel. Thank you.
Jordan?
Yes, I think expanding the EV charging network is important, especially taking or considering the growth of EVs. But congestion on the electricity network will become a major challenge in the future, and I think we need to make sure that the charging infrastructure is smart and manageable. To become future-proof and to integrate renewables as much as possible, so we can optimize the supply and demand, and possibly making use of V2G as batteries are expensive and other energy storages may not be as efficient as using batteries. And we will get a whole bunch of EVs on the network to make use of this, and as Esther rightfully said, 90% of the time these cars are not used, so we better make use of them when they're not used.
Maybe Esther, you want to add something? Yeah, you're
sorry. Yes, unmuted. Yes, I think I would just I agree with what Jordan was saying, and also Alexander, of course. It's imperative that the rollout of charging infrastructure is speeding up. However, I would recommend and reiterate what I said in the chat as well, is to for municipalities to look at it not just from a mobility strategy plan, but really bring the energy and mobility strategies together here. That will better identify where your smart charging or even vehicle to X opportunities are best applied, and where in terms of return on investment, they are most attractive, and that will help prevent the congestion and grid issues that would be coming our way if we all together massively roll out without considering this as a joint strategy. And that means really future-proofing the e-charging strategy, I think.
Absolutely. Jasmeet, do you want to talk?
Yeah, I will just add real estate apart from energy and mobility to Esther's comment, because that's also important, both public and private real estate. But just on behalf of WBCSD, we are a private sector led organization, and all our members are companies and businesses. And we have a very strong focus on business-led adoption or business action to kind of move us towards a faster adoption of electric vehicles. In that context, we are working with about 20 companies, so Microsoft, Daimler, like all sorts of companies, EDP, NL, etc., to create some of these market rules and some of these value frameworks that I talked about, which is related to how these sectors need to collaborate and what is the value they can unlock if they do collaborate, and what kind of market rules will they require. So we are more than happy to engage with academics, cities, and anyone else who wants to engage with the private sector on these topics. And if there is any interest, please do reach out to us.
Call for action.
Yep.
Peter?
Yes. What I would like to add as a closure remark is that I also think that we need to come back to earth, because rolling out the charging infrastructure is done by people, and it's done by people at the grid companies, at the municipalities, and at the CPOs. And what I would propose to all the cities still in the starting stages is that you make sure that in every of these three organizations there's somebody responsible for the rollout of the charging infrastructure in your city, so that the triangle, so to speak, can cooperate in a very effective way, and in this way make sure that the demand for charging infrastructure is met very fast and not lagging behind. So that's I think very important remark for all the cities listening at this moment.
You, Peter. Simon?
Yes, thank you. I of course agree with everything that's being said until now from a regional perspective and also from BENEFIC perspective. I only wanted to add that, in my opinion, there is no one-way approach to deploy the charging infrastructure. So have a look at the information that's available, the experiences, and also the different funding programs that are in place. Yeah, it takes some effort to find your way in all these structures and all these programs, but I'm sure that they can be useful and helping you with the rollout of infrastructure. And I also wanted to add that make sure that you take into account cross-border infrastructure, because as we all know, EV drivers, they don't stop at the border. So more and more, if we see that the uptake of EVs is increasing, the the drivers throughout Europe will increase as well. So we really have to make sure that we tackle these cross-border issues that still exist today. And one way in doing that is to get involved in European projects and make sure to discuss these issues with neighboring countries and other European countries. Thanks.
As usual, collaboration is key here. So thank you all, the panelists, for the very inspiring discussions we've had today. That was great, and I think I've learned a lot. I'm happy that this was recorded, so we can always go back to the recordings whenever we want to recover some of the information. I also thank the audience very much, because the questions were very smart and they were very active in the chat. So I will wrap up here and just remind you all that the closing plenary is starting at 2 p.m. and we'll have Adina Valian from the European Commission, the European Commissioner for Transport, and Robin Chase, transport entrepreneur, co-founder of Zipcar and founder of Newmont, as keynote speakers. So I encourage you all to join it. Thank you again for your participation and keep in touch.
Thank you also on behalf of POLIS.